Today you're going to be taking notes on mitosis, which is how cells divide. So make sure that you have your notebook and you have it open to your next available page. Throughout the PowerPoint, you're also going to be taking notes. Anything that's written in red means that you need to write it down. Some things will be written in your notebook and some things will be written on the handouts that I provided to you, which are going to be foldables that are later going to be glued into your notebook. But I'll let you know when to write where. So the first thing I want you to do in your notebook is I want you to write a paragraph, so about 4 sentences, explaining these 3 questions here. And there's no right or wrong answer, so you'll get the points as long as I see your response is thoughtful and that you've put effort into your answer. So I want you to write down, why do we need to replace cells? When has your body ever needed to replace cells? And how do you think this happens? Okay, and just so this is ready for later on, you're not going to use it right away, but take that paper that I gave you and fold it so that it looks like what is shown on the screen here, and then you're going to label the flaps. So the top part, in case you can't read the handwriting here, says interphase, the second flap says prophase, the third flap says metaphase, the fourth flap says anaphase, and the fifth flap says telophase. Once you've written down the titles, go and take your scissors and cut on the lines right here and right here and so forth so that you get the 5 flaps. Okay, so just some facts for you guys, some interesting facts. If you were to look at your skin cells, every single hour you lose 30 to 40,000 skin cells. Your skin cells have a lifespan, so that's how many die every hour. In one day, you're going to lose 1 million skin cells. So even though you don't notice it, that's how much is shedding off of you. And in a year, you're going to actually lose 8 pounds of skin, which is pretty phenomenal. That's a lot of skin cells that you lose. And if you've ever looked at your house, all that dust that kind of accumulates and builds up in your home, a lot of it is made up of your skin cells or your family members' skin cells. So that's just kind of interesting. But, I mean, what happens to that skin? I mean, if you lose 1 million skin cells a day, how do you get that back? And obviously there is a way to do that because eventually you would have no skin, right? Your blood cells, your white blood cells also have a lifespan. They only live to be a few hours old, so cells have different lifespans. Your red blood cells have a lifespan of 120 days and then they die. Your nerve and brain cells are the only cells that live as long as you do. So if you live to be 90, well, so will your brain cells. Unless, of course, you're doing something to them, like using substances that you shouldn't be using that's going to kill them. And once you kill your nerve and brain cells, they don't come back. Okay, so unlike other cells, those cells don't come back. Okay, but anyway, so we know there's many different types of cells and they all have different lifespans, but you are made up of 100 trillion cells. That's a lot of cells. But when you were first created, so when your mom and dad had you, so the sperm fertilized the egg, you started off as a single one-celled organism. And then you became 2, and then you became 4 cells, and then 8 cells, and so forth, until you're the 100 trillion cells today. So how did you go from the 1 cell to the 100 trillion cells? How does that happen? Well, the answer is mitosis. So in your notebook, on the top of your next blank page, write down mitosis, what's in red, and define it. It is cell division. Your cells divide to make more cells. Now, mitosis has to do with body cells, so your skin, your hair, your nails, your bone, all the cells that are body cells, and they divide. So if you look at this picture here, you start off as 1 cell, and then this 1 cell copies DNA. The reason why it copies DNA is because if we're going to make a new cell from this one, every cell needs DNA, right? So you need to make a copy for it. Then eventually what's going to happen here, if you look down here, you can just start to see the formation of 2 cells, so the cell is starting to divide. And then it forms 2 identical cells to the original. Okay, so this cell is the same as this one and this one. So that is mitosis, cell division. So why do we do mitosis? Why is it important? Again, for growth. Like I mentioned, if you are a single fertilized egg, you need to become the 100 trillion cells that you are today. You need to make more cells. You're not the same height as you were when you were 3 years old, right? You've grown since then. You've developed more bone cells. You developed more skin cells. So you've created more cells throughout your life. We also need to replace worn and damaged cells. So again, if your skin cells die, you need to be able to replace those cells. Otherwise, you're not going to have any left. If you have blood cells that die, again, you need to be able to replace those because obviously you need blood. And then also to repair damaged tissue. When you cut yourself, you lose cells. So right here in this picture here, not only did this person lose skin cells, but they also lost blood cells. And so those need to be replaced. How do we replace those? Well, the cells surrounding the cut, so on the border of the cut, they get a chemical message that they need to do mitosis, that they need to divide. And they're going to keep dividing until they start to run into each other and until the gap has been closed. So here over time you can see that we developed here new skin cells. Okay, so they did it through mitosis. But cells don't just split in half. There's a little bit more to mitosis than that, because if a cell just simply split in half, every time a cell would undergo mitosis, it would get smaller, and then smaller, and then smaller and smaller until you wouldn't really have any cell anymore. So there's more to mitosis than just dividing. Okay, so how does a cell begin to do mitosis? Well, we already learned that every single cell has a nucleus in eukaryotic cells. So you guys have a nucleus. So here's the nucleus right here. And within the nucleus is our nucleic acid, our DNA, right? And we look at parts of DNA, and these parts of DNA are called chromosomes, and they carry, again, all of our genetic information. When you're born, as long as you're you don't have a mutation, you're born with 46 chromosomes. 23 you got from mom and 23 you got from dad. But it's your genetic information, and they're carried inside the nucleus. Okay? If we're going to create a new cell, the cell needs to copy the chromosome so that the new cell will also have a set of DNA, also have a set of chromosomes. So again, mitosis begins as a single cell. So if you look at the cell over here, this is the original cell. Here's our nucleus, and here's the DNA. And then the DNA is going to make a copy. So if you look here, this long green strand here is now 2 because it made a copy. This short orange strand is now 2 over here because it made a copy. So it's making copies of DNA. And then it can divide so that when the chromosomes or the DNA splits in half, each new cell will have exactly the same DNA, and it'll be identical to the original. So write this down. The new cell has a full set of chromosomes and is identical to the original cell. And it's important that it's identical. It'd be kind of weird if you lost a skin cell and then your body made something different, right? So you want to replace a skin cell with a skin cell, and you want it to be identical to the one that you lost. Okay, so mitosis produces identical cells with the exact same number of chromosomes. Okay. And then cells can keep doing this, so they can do it over and over and over again, and eventually we'll get the 100 trillion cells that we are today. So just like humans, our cells have a life cycle. They go through stages of life, like we won't go from babies to adolescents to adults, right? Well, your cells have a life cycle too. So pull out this paper here in front of you that you should have, and you're going to fill this out. This is the life cycle of a cell, and it starts right here, G0. Okay, that's stage 0. That's where it starts. Anytime you see a G, that means growth. So the first thing a cell needs to do, just like you, right? You need to grow. So the cell grows in size, and then the cell copies its DNA. Then the cell grows some more, and then it actually goes through cell division. And this M here stands for mitosis. Okay, so it actually does cell division here. Mitosis is cell division. The growing and copying DNA phase is something called interphase, where it grows, copies, and grows. That's called interphase. That's the phase of its life, okay? So go and copy this down. You can pause if you need to, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. So let's talk about interphase real quick. In interphase, so on your other foldable now, on the top flap where it says interphase, flip it over and write this definition and draw this picture here. In interphase, the cell has to grow and has to copy its DNA. Why does a cell have to grow? Well, again, like I told you before, if a cell simply divided in half, and that's all it did, every time a cell underwent cell division, the cell would get smaller and smaller and smaller. So basically what has to happen is the original cell has to basically double in size so that when it does get split in half, each new cell is the same size as the original. So it has to grow first. And then it's copying its DNA so that the new cell will also have DNA. So that's interphase. So in interphase, the DNA just kind of everywhere. It's all randomly squiggly filling up the nucleus. It's what we call loosely coiled. Okay, after interphase, so if you look at our thing, so all this right here is interphase. Then it's mitosis, and mitosis, actual cell dividing, has 5 steps, or 4 steps. So we're going to go over that. The four steps are prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. And you have to remember the correct order of these steps. And a way to remember is you can either remember PMAT, if that works for you, or you can remember this saying here, pass me a taco. The P in pass stands for prophase, the M stands for metaphase, the A stands for anaphase, and the T stands for telophase. So however you can remember, that's the order. Okay, so the first actual step of a cell dividing is called prophase. So please write this down under the prophase flap and draw the picture. The first thing that happens is the nucleus starts to disappear. So if you look on this picture over here, there's dotted lines representing that the nucleus is going away. And then the DNA is no longer scattered throughout. It actually kind of condenses, which means it gets packed together and starts to look like an X. So this is the shape of a chromosome here, the shape of an X. So that's the first step of mitosis. Then what happens is metaphase, and the chromosomes move to the middle. So under your metaphase flap, write this and draw the picture. And you can see here all the chromosomes moved in the cell and they all lined up in the middle right here. And a way to remember this is meta starts with an M, middle starts with an M. So the chromosomes line up in the middle. And this is what it looks like in real life. And then we have anaphase. So the cell needs to eventually split into two, right? So we need to move equal amounts of chromosomes on each half of the cell. So in anaphase, the chromosomes get pulled apart. So that's what's being represented here in the diagram. The chromosomes are being pulled apart from one side, and this one's going to the other side. So write this down and draw the picture. And this is what it looks like in real life. And then the last stage is telophase. When you see tele starts with a T, think two. Two starts with a T, telophase starts with T. And basically the one cell now starts to look like two cells. We can see the actual formation of two cells. The nucleus is going to reform because this is going to be a new cell here and this is going to be a new cell here, so they need their own nucleus. And the chromosomes are actually going to eventually begin to uncoil, and they're not going to look like those X's anymore. And then eventually what's going to happen is something called cytokinesis, which is where the cytoplasm gets cut. So what's basically going to happen is the cytoplasm right here is going to get cut in half, and these two cells will be separated. And that's cytokinesis, when the two cells are actually their own individual cells. Okay, so again, mitosis makes identical cells, and they are clones of each other. So that is the end goal of mitosis. Okay, so again, this all happens in a fluid motion. So let's look at the steps of mitosis. We start off with one cell. In prophase, the chromosomes, or interphase, the chromosomes copy, sorry. In prophase, the nucleus is going to disappear. So we're going to see that right now. The nucleus disappears. And then in metaphase, the chromosomes line up in the middle. Then in anaphase, they get pulled apart. So here they go, they get pulled apart. Telophase, we're going to start to see the formation of two cells. So that's telophase right now. And then in cytokinesis, they get cut in half. And then we have our two separate cells. So let's watch that one more time. So right now we're in interphase, chromosomes are copying. Prophase, the nucleus is going to start to disappear, so that's prophase. Metaphase, they line up in the middle. Anaphase, they're going to get pulled apart. Telophase, we're going to start to see the formation of two cells. Cytokinesis cuts the cells, and then we get our two identical copies of cells. Okay, so if you lost a skin cell, this is what's happening. The cells around it are doing this to fill the gap. Okay? Okay. And again, this is just another visual representation. You go from one cell to two. How it does it is it copies the DNA, chromosomes line up in the middle. Anaphase, they get pulled apart. Telophase, you start to see two cells. And then cytokinesis cuts the two cells, and so we get the two identical cells. Okay, so try to practice this. What phase do you think this is? What phase do you think this is? What phase is this? What phase do you think that is? That's the same one. What phase is that? What phase is that? And so you're going to practice these tomorrow. So don't worry about it right now. We're going to practice these tomorrow, but just try to get an idea of what you think it would be. Okay, so go ahead and glue in your cell cycle picture in your notebook, and then also glue in your mitosis foldable into your notebook as well. And then you can rewatch any parts that maybe you didn't understand and you need to clarify. And raise your hand if you have any questions.